Welcome everyone to this incredible webinar. We are so excited to be hosting the webinar today on adaptations and innovations for museums, a global view. Just before we get started, I'm just going to do a little introduction on myself and POE. So I am the co-founder and the global culture lead for POE. POE is a global strategic advisory firm comprised of 40 sector experts from around the world. Today's moderator is Megan Mayer, POE's global marketing lead. And Megan and I are so excited about this topic in particular because we have worked with leading museums from around the world over the years. Megan has worked closely with the Brooklyn Museum and the Cooper Hewitt Museum, curating art events and providing innovative collaborations and partnerships. And I was the client representative for the new build of the Whitney Museum, the Renzo Piano Museum, Design Museum in downtown New York City. So with that said, I'm very excited to present today's webinar and introduce our incredible panelists. I'm going to start with Andrew Cohn. Andrew, Chief Strategic Officer of the Whitney Museum of American Art. We have Aurélie Cochet, Director of External Affairs for Musée d'Orsay in Paris. Sharon Matz-Atkins, the Director of Curatorial Affairs at Brooklyn Museum. And last but absolutely not least, Neil McConan, Director of International Partnerships for Tate Modern. Hi, Neil.
Hello.
Just before we get stuck into our questions for these amazing panelists, I just wanted to say to our attendees, if you have any questions, send them through to the Q&A box that you have on your screen, and we will get to them towards the end of the webinar. So with that all being said, I'm going to hand it over to Megan to kick things off. Thanks so much, Megan.
Thank you, Lauren, and wonderful to have everyone here today from all around the world. This is really, really exciting, and we've got some fantastic topics to talk about today. The first one I want to talk about is programming. So museums have relied heavily on ticket sales for funding. With the doors closed for over 5 months, this has really impacted on the operations and programming for the rest of 2020 and beyond. A question for the Whitney Museum of American Art. How has your museum adapted to this change?
Yeah, thanks, Megan, and thank you, Lauren, for inviting us. So thrilled to speak alongside such esteemed colleagues and look forward to hearing from all of them. You know, it's no surprise that it has been a difficult calendar year for arts and cultural institutions. I know the Whitney is no different. We closed for 5 months and just reopened on August 27th to members and community partners who we've worked closely with, and then on September 3rd to the public at large. You know, so, and I should mention that there's a lot of work that, you know, people think the museums close and nothing happens, but, you know, people at the museum, or many of us, were working more than we did usually to sort of figure out this next normal. And a lot of that was operational, but a lot of it was also how can we continue to be a civic resource, especially to the city in which we sort of serve audiences, whether it's, you know, our programs for school children, or donating PPP, or finding opportunities to engage with new audiences online. There was a great deal of work that was happening during the closure, both linearly to plan for reopening and to buttress the mission of the institution during that period. But to your point, I think there are a couple sort of parts of that. You know, operationally, I should again mention that something that's maybe not talked about enough is that we had an on-site team at the museum for that entire 5 months. You know, a terrific crew of dedicated colleagues from, you know, security, engineering teams, our facilities colleagues who have been absolutely amazing. And, you know, much of the rest of the administration team spent that closure time reopening planning, right? So how do we prioritize the safety of our visitors and our staff? And, you know, when I was thinking about the higher level themes that came out of this, I would say that one of the things, at least in New York, and I'd love to hear Sharon's thoughts, or, you know, Neil and Aurélie, to contrast them, is that I think the museums in New York have worked more closely together in the last year than they really ever had before. And not, not to say that it's a lovely non-competitive dynamic anyway. Everyone sort of has carved out their own institutional identities. But, for the first time, we had a 25-member, really unprecedented alliance of cultural institutions in New York across all 5 boroughs that was partially co-led by our COO or co-COO, Amy Roth, the New York City Museum Reopening Task Force. And that group was brought together, not by the city or by any governmental entity or even any industry entity, but actually by the museums themselves. And basically realizing that when it comes to operations, when it comes to programming, we are much stronger together than we are tackling these problems separately. So in terms of developing unified protocols or messaging or procedures, that of course could be nuanced for each institution, but visitors coming back to institutions will feel more comfortable if they don't see difference across the visitor experience, right? Staff will take comfort in the decisions of their employers, the cultural institutions, should they move in relative lockstep. And that was also partially, especially in New York, which had a very specific relationship to the COVID curve, was inspired by the way that the hospitals had begun to collaborate since the onset of the pandemic. Again, sort of, not competitive dynamics often, but still working together in a really different sort of way. So, I'm sure we'll get into the details of the operations, but, there have been a great many changes to how we function on site. To the headline of your question, programmatically, that we adjusted our exhibition calendar, working very closely with partner and peer institutions where we have intersecting touring schedules, to make sure our audiences could see all the exhibitions that we had opened. We were, mentioning before that we had some exhibitions that were open for 7 days. Our 8th floor show, Agnes Pelton, was only open for 1 day. So that was important for the leadership team. And the other part I would say is that the Whitney does see itself as a real proponent and supporter of living artists. So that, our senior deputy director, Scott Rothkopf, made a really clear statement that we would honor our commitments to all living artists who had been scheduled to visit our galleries. So, I think that it's a sort of a roller coaster of reactive movement, but trying to pull back into what are the values that we have that would enable us to make decisions in these moments, and who would we like to be in these transitional moments. And financially, it's a very tough road. The generosity of our board is really inspiring and unending. And so, as I'm curious again to hear from other European and ex-European museums, but the sort of earned income, contributed income endowment model does rely on tickets and membership. So it is a challenge that we continue to face. But we've been reopened for 2 weeks now. And are really focusing on New York City locals, on our closest communities. We reopened with a month of Pay What You Wish, so that the admissions hurdle for the gate fee would not be an issue, and are looking forward to continuing to evolve into this sort of next normal.
And we certainly found we were going through endless scenario planning because there was just so many questions about when we would be able to reopen. And our fiscal year starts on July 1, and so leading up to that, and the questions of what this coming year will look like is still unknown. And so needing to think about how you adjust your programming, when you don't know what the future holds was a big challenge. But I think, to Andrew's point, I think we definitely benefited from the network and being able to just sort of connect with colleagues and understand, what is everyone thinking, and, trying to come to a place of understanding. But there was a period where it was changing literally weekly, in terms of what, people were anticipating. So it's a challenge.
It's wonderful that there is a network come out of all of this, a really strong sense of community. Thank you for that feedback. Question for Musée d'Orsay. What are some of the innovations and changings for the programming of art for your museum? I mean, has the museum looked to the archives that have not exhibited before, or even partnering with other museums for the loan of art? Can you share some of your innovations and planning behind the scenes?
Sure. Thank you for your question and thank you for having me here. We're very honored to be sharing this great panel with such great panelists. And I think my answer might be a little bit of a side one, since what we have been focusing on since the lockdown and ever since we've reopened, we are a little ahead as we reopened mid-June and we've been open throughout the summer. So, and the other difference between our colleagues and the Musée d'Orsay is that we are a national museum, our state-owned museum, meaning that I think we have faced a little less stress, even though, of course, we have had tremendous financial loss, as everyone has. We all rely on ticketing as well, so everything has been closed, shut down for 3 months for us, which is a great amount of time. But the fact is that the generosity that you guys have experienced with your boards and patrons is the one that we have experienced with our government, which have they have very generously given us extra support for the year. Just for the record, we are a public institution, but we rely on our self-funding generally. The only thing that the state pays for us is the salary, which is in the current situation is a huge help, of course, because the one thing that we didn't have to stress about is letting go people. We didn't have any staff reduction, and again, that led us to focus all of our efforts in maintaining the programming, maintaining our program of exhibitions throughout the summer. Same as Andrew, we opened an exhibition on March 13 and we were shut down 3 days afterwards, meaning that our main concern was that the 2 exhibitions that we had opened in March would find their public in a way. So what we managed to extend the length of these exhibitions, and I couldn't agree more with Andrew with the I mean, what you guys have experienced without in New York and the 5 boroughs, we have experienced at international level, because all of our exhibitions are co-produced with European institutions, with American ones, and all of our efforts, we did not have to worry to struggle about our core survival. We knew that we would still be here. We could focus on having conversations from day one with our partners all over the place, just to see, and everyone, I have seen nothing but extreme generosity and great spirit of solidarity, because everyone was willing, helpful to move things around to accommodate new schedules. And that's the way I think we all innovated together, is playing Tetris in a way with all of our schedules, because our goal at the Musée d'Orsay was not to have one single project canceled. We knew we had to postpone, we knew we had to extend, but we didn't want to cancel anything. And as soon as we began these conversations, again, with colleagues that were really suffering, that were struggling for survival, that were in a spirit of uncertainty and disruption, far way more than we were, and yet we had this spirit of understanding and solidarity. So that's the one thing we are extremely grateful for. And we managed to, well, it's not our big blockbuster, even though we're not very keen on this B word. It's not, we don't like it, but anyways, we're supposed to open in September, and it has just been postponed a few weeks, and we'll be opening in November. And yet we just reopened 2 days ago an exhibition that was supposed to take place next April, and now it has been moved to now. So again, it's playing Tetris, but again, playing in a very, very great spirit. And I think the reason why we all connected on that is that we know, and I think that we share this very strong belief that going full steam in a way is the only answer to this situation. That we have a mission, whether we're public or private funded or whatever our status is, people are missing cultural institutions. And we have this in our core mission, is that we have to do our job. We are committed to being open, to welcoming people. And I think that this is one of the greatest learnings of this era, is that the public needs, we all need arts and culture as a sort of markers, guidance, as individuals and as a community. So providing this access to art has become even more crucial than it was before. And I think that this is what has driven us throughout these difficult months.
Thank you, Aurelie. So on to the Tate Modern. Can you share with us ways in which partnerships, specifically international partnerships, which Aurelie has been talking about, that have actually impacted and changed since lockdown for you?
Hi, Megan, Lauren, and colleagues. Very good to be here. And that's a really great, very pertinent question. I would say that even before lockdown, Tate had been exploring different models of partnership. But lockdown certainly has allowed us more clarity, more focus, and more urgency to perhaps speed up this process. Whereas previously we might have developed an exhibition and then sought international partners who we think were a good fit to tour the show too, we're now much more focused and concerned to initiate and develop new concepts, new partnerships with others. So Tate obviously has a wonderful advantage here. We have our collections. We're very fortunate to be able to draw upon them. Currently, we have exhibitions that range from Turner, Constable, Pre-Raphaelites, David Hockney. But if we're conceiving a show that requires additional works from outside the organization, where we very well might consider or even propose a co-production. So a co-production, really importantly, is where both parties can contribute to the artworks, share costs of development, catalog production, even marketing. These are genuine co-productions, not just in name, but very much in spirit. I think they can work especially well in the case of partnering with groups that might have skills or expertise in areas like technology, architecture, digital know-how, where new contributions can be brought to the table, where the process and ideas and skills that each partner brings to the mix are complementary and serve to enhance the overall visitor experience and take that visitor experience to a new level. The co-producers each contribute to the production costs, and in this way, the exhibition budget can be much larger than any of us individually might be able to realize. So with museum budgets currently depleted in the way that they are, all museums, I think could benefit enormously from this way of working. Personally, it's my hope that we can develop at Tate all new exhibitions in collaboration wherever possible. Tate would likely take the lead on day-to-day curation, concept, narrative, discussions and input from co-producers, but all the parties play a vital role in developing the exhibitions, all striving for the same shared vision, all pooling ideas, resources, and budgets in the process. The exhibition then launches at each of our partner venues before progressing to an international tour. So if I could just add about the blockbuster, because I think blockbuster is a really intriguing phenomenon. And it's very true that in this time of such desperation with such huge budget and funding uncertainties, that pooling resources, ideas, and budget makes total sense. The blockbuster in the sense of a huge unwieldy exhibition with hundreds of loans from across the globe may well be phasing out, and probably with good reason. But exhibitions with strategic loans from select sources is very likely one way to reignite public interest in visiting museums. These need to be really compelling, relevant themes. They need to resonate with audiences, rigorously developed, and yet accessible to multiple audiences and accessible globally. So I think it's these types of shows, if curated sensitively, that could work on many different levels to improve the appetites of audiences, as well as addressing the unsustainable ways of working that we've all been guilty of in the past. Co-productions allow for the curation and development of ambitious projects that neither of the partners on their own could possibly stretch to financially, and especially so in the current circumstances. It makes sense that it's a very creative solution, and financial uncertainty is such that, all the more, I think it points to another positive outcome of COVID, where, a greater sense of community, of empathy, and the realization that we're stronger and we serve our communities better together.
Great.
Neil, just to jump in on that, I really like I like the sort of parallel operational collaboration and sort of, crisis collaboration, to be frank, and then the sort of visionary aspirational programming collaboration. We are also experimenting in new ways of new modes of collaboration. It's not international, but our sort of peer institution in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia Museum of Art and the Whitney are collaborating on a simultaneous joint retrospective of Jasper John's work. So it will be presented simultaneously. It's a sort of part 1 and part 2, or part 2 and part 1, but that can be seen separately, but will enrich each part of that experience. And that was partly exactly as the drivers of that were what you exactly talked about, the similar vision to need to engage with a depth of work, a vast array of objects across a vast array of institutions' collections. So that was actually, to Arlie's point, that was one of the not canceled but delayed shows given all the logistics. But I think that in the US we have seen that too. It's not just about touring shows, taking or loaning, but rather working together. So interesting to hear your thoughts.
If I may jump in too, just to bounce on that and to tell the same, is that as a French museum, we also collaborate a lot with the Louvre Abu Dhabi, this UFO that was created and it was opened a few years ago. And as a status, all of the French museums have a program of exhibitions every 2 out of 3 years. And what we did this year, because again, this situation is a worldwide one, is that we all collaborated together to create a special program for the Louvre Abu Dhabi to be able to provide them with more artwork, even though it was very difficult to have the artwork actually travel there. But they were in need for something, and the great solidarity also expressed in that way. I mean, and that was not included in the original partnership. It was not part of it, but we all stick together to provide them with what they needed at that time.
I really feel like this way of working is the future. And I think, we're probably being forced to do this in many ways, but, it is such an opportunity for us now, from this crisis to realize this, I think, much more flexible and versatile way of working.
Thank you for everyone's input. I just love what's coming out of this is community and network and empathy and supporting one another, which leads me to my next subject, talking about museums and cultural responsibility. Museums really do provide patrons and their cities and communities with the opportunity to reflect on the past, present and future of culture and art in our society with their exhibits and programming. In 2020, we've experienced radical societal changes from COVID and various other relations, including the Black Lives Matter movement around the world, most especially here in America. So I want to share this question with Sharon of the Brooklyn Museum. Can you explain some of the ways that the Brooklyn Museum has chosen to represent and support this movement?
Yeah. So this June, following the murder of George Floyd, and sadly, too many others in recent months, the museum has, done a lot of outreach. We have really done sort of reaching out to organizers, especially of various protests and rallies to support their use of our outdoor space and our museum plaza for gatherings. All independently organized, but supporting them to, and really to invite them in and to use the museum and our outdoor space as a public gathering spot for protests and rallies. We, in very early June, for example, we began opening our restrooms right at our entrance to protesters. Even though the museum was closed to the public, people were invited in so that they had a place for a pause. And in sort of continuing to just, support and really encourage the museum as a space for this, for these gatherings. We were, for example, the site for the Black Trans Lives Matter gathering that brought about 15,000 people onto the museum's plaza. And, again, while not an organizer of that, supporting that and encouraging those gatherings. We've also developed new programming to center BIPOC artists. We have a great outdoor exhibition that's on right now and through the end of October that features video work from our collection. We've also collaborated with Carrie Mae Weems on her, it's an artist-driven public awareness campaign called Resist COVID Take 6. And that promotes preventative measures, but also speaks to the disproportionate impact that COVID has had on Black and Brown communities. And that has a visual presentation on our stairs outside and also part of that video program as well. And I think I would just say that we have the concerns of diversity, inclusion, equity, and access have always been part of our work. And we began developing a DEI plan a couple of years ago that was adopted by our board. And we have continued that work with greater urgency and focus. Just yesterday, we had a joint meeting of our board and our staff DEIA committees. And just always continuing that work and supporting those efforts.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's very commendable. And as usual, the Brooklyn Museum so tightly and connected and representative of its community. Let's talk about operations. I know we've all tapped into this a little bit with your various answers, but I'd like to pose this question to Musée d'Orsay, Aurélie. How do we as museums take the crisis of 2020 as an opportunity to rethink the visitor experience for the years to come?
Well, that's a very interesting question. Actually, Neil already talked a little bit about enhancing visitor experience, and I totally relate. But I think that visitor experience, at least for us, but I think we share this, was actually in our mind way prior this crisis. And perhaps this 2020 crisis has acted as sort of as an accelerator for things that we already had in our mind or in our work in progress, and that we just had to implement way faster than we thought. But again, as a national museum, we have this mission to open up to the public and make all of our collections accessible to each and every one, no matter their age, nationality, gender, no matter what Twitter says these days. But anyways, their gender or their social background. We are engaged by nature per se in an audience-centric approach, not a marketing one, but again, one that is more at the core of our missions. And that mission actually calls for a continuous improvement of the visitor experience, because if you want to share your collection, if you want to make them accessible, then you have to be very, very careful so as to the way that people actually can access the museum and can experience their journey within the museum. So I think that it all starts with the main purpose of our museum, which is to create or facilitate the encounter with the works of art. It's a thought-provoking moment, it's an emotion-provoking moment, and we also aim at providing tools to understand what these artworks are actually telling us of the world we live in, the society we live in, of the crisis sometimes that we can experiment. And I think that through visitor experience, we actually want to connect also with future generations and, I don't know, show them that they can come to the museum in an open-minded and free way, and not in a very uptight and intellectual only, as it was, well, at least for the Musée d'Orsay, that was the approach for several years, and now we're trying to open that up And to fulfill that goal, I mean, the cornerstone is visitor experience. At the Musée d'Orsay, we have like 3.5 million visitors a year in a normal year, of course. And I think we have already reached, in terms of volume, our capacity of offering a great visitor experience. So our strategies are not into increasing attendance, but always offering the best possible experience. So one of the great things, one of the great outcomes of this crisis is that, as all of you guys have done, I think, is implementing this pre-booking online and timed entry tickets. And this is something that we had in our minds for a long time. But again, we were somehow in between. What we have to do as a museum is that open up to everyone, and it was considered a little bit constraining to have this timed entry slots. And now we see it as actually the tool for the future. We see that now today I went to the museum galleries this afternoon, and it is the best way to experience the museum. Honestly, it's almost VIP visits. We used to have 10,000 people a day, and now we have 2,000 people a day. And honestly, it's a great way to experience the museum. So this is somehow in our minds right now to see how we can fulfill that goal with still being sustainable, generating revenue, and having a financial model that is yes, again, sustainable and that generates resources. So, but again, the thing is that we welcome many audiences from all over the world, with many nationalities, with families, older people, kids, and they all have different expectations. They all have different ways of experiencing a museum. They all, yes, they want something different, but they all have something in common, is that they want to have a great visit, and they don't want the crowds, they don't want to wait, and they want to have services in addition to the artwork. So this is what we have now. But again, the crisis is an accelerator, but we always trying to find new ways of improving. And we have this great project that is a transformative one, and that is centered on the visitor experience. So again, I think that the crisis obviously will pass. It is a very deep one, it's a tough one, it hits very hard and very strongly on museums, but it will pass. And the real need that we have to keep is contemplated what the landscape will be and what the audiences of tomorrow will be and will need, and always be in that continuous questioning our model and seeing how we can improve and how we are able to respond to those needs. So that's our strategy and that's our mindset.
Thank you for sharing that. So many positive incomes for how you've been innovative and pivoted to this change. And obviously everything's been fast forwarded and now it's a part of your programming. So there are so many great positives out of that. So over to Sharon at the Brooklyn Museum. You've recently opened up your doors, and I had the privilege of coming to your museum the other day and had a wonderful experience. How are visitors responding to the reopening? I know that you just opened up over the last weekend. It may be very different to Europe or the UK.
Yeah, so we just opened to the public on Saturday. 6 months closed, half a year. It's like hard to imagine that happened, but the energy was absolutely fantastic on Saturday. You know, our major exhibition right now is Studio 54, and while at reduced capacity, we were sold out for all of the slots for the exhibition. We literally had people dancing in the exhibition. Now, of course, it is Studio 54 and we have built-in dance floors into the exhibition, but they were dancing in the galleries, and that was just like the best possible thing. But we also had music outdoors, food, chalk drawing and such. So it was a really wonderful day to just have people coming back to the museum. And you know, everyone was very respectful of, you know, social distancing requirements, mask, you know, face coverings. And, you know, I think everyone was just happy to be out seeing art and, it was a lot of really great energy.
It was an event without being an official event, would you say?
Exactly. Yeah. It really felt like people were just, excited to be back at the museum, and that felt really good. I mean, as we're saying, like the central to that is our existence, of like connecting people with our collections, with our exhibitions, and so being able to see that happening again was really wonderful.
And Andrew over at the Whitney and Neil at the Tate, how have your experiences been to date since you've reopened?
I would say, I would echo Sharon's. There's a real appetite for visitors to come back, and it's so rewarding to see them physically in the space and to hear the gasps and the connectedness that they have and the relationship that they have with the collections. I think we obviously have more work to do in terms of public confidence in making people feel safe and secure. But that's a question of time. Visitors are coming, numbers are good, and I think if we maintain all of the obviously all of the regulations that are in place, I see no reason why things won't just continue to improve. But initial soundings are very positive, I would say.
Yeah, I would echo Neil and Sharon on that front. I think we've seen good numbers, especially in those first weeks. It really is just such a feel-good moment to have the visitors who are the closest to the fold and who have been waiting for months to come back into galleries they know and love. It's just hugely, hugely rewarding, especially for a mission-driven organization. I mean, I think there's also the reality. I mean, one of the topics which is really discussed a great deal across a lot of industries is remote workforces right now. And I think that undoubtedly that's hard for many institutions or organizations, but there's also a particularity to working on site at a cultural mission-driven organization where the reason staff work there is because they believe in what they're doing. And one, all the staff are separated, right? They're responsibly quarantining wherever they may be. And two, they don't have the proximity to the program, to what we do, to seeing the visitors. One of the things that I know we'll talk a little bit more about the space and architectural implications later, but I mean, one of the great things I enjoy about the Whitney is that we don't have two sort of separate systems or spaces for visitors and staff. The elevators the visitors use or the elevators the staff use. We use the visitor stairwells. Our galleries open up into our offices. They're just glass walls. So you have people looking in on your conferences, which are conference room meetings, which is always entertaining. I think sometimes they think that we're like part of a performance piece, but it's a beautiful part of the transparency of the building that allows for people to feel the impact of their work, whether they're a curator or an art handler, or whether they're an accountant. They understand what they're doing and what it builds to. And so one thing I would say, to go back to Neil's point, finding silver linings of this moment, and Arlie mentioned this, but the time ticketing program that we've, and I think all museums have really embraced, requires that everyone transact online, right? So it used to be that we would have a certain percentage of people transact online, and that would differ by different segments and geographies and demographics, but a lot of people would also just walk up. And because it's rare for a large museum to sell out of space on any given day, usually specific exhibitions exempt from that, of course, we actually have much better data now about who's coming, and we can start a conversation with many more people coming to the museum than we could in the old normal, right? And so whether it's net promoter score, whether it's different forms of metrics, and we've really thought about how we can bring the voice of the visitor back to the staff, to the trustees, to the discussion in a moment where our staff will continue to work remotely for some time to come. So that separation between the staff and the museum will continue for the foreseeable future here in New York. And we're thinking about ways, we have a lot of great quantitative, but also great qualitative feedback that happens from post-visit surveys, again, that can go to many more visitors than before, and finding creative ways that, center the voice of the visitor, that, to Arlie's point, always sort of pin us on a continuum of progress towards a better visitor experience. and also enable us to respond nimbly and responsibly to feedback.
That's fantastic. Thank you for that feedback, which leads me into the next very important topic, technology and sustainability. So during the lockdown of COVID-19 in 2020, we witnessed museums around the world adopt to new technology and platforms to create interactive environments and educational tools for their patrons and the public to provide a form of engagement and connection in a place and to replace the physical environment. So question for the Tate Modern. Neil, could you discuss the connection between technology, sustainability, and innovation for the Tate, which has stemmed from the COVID lockdown?
This is a very, I think, very urgent and vital question. It's a really good one. I think technology is enabling very real and hopefully very long-term solutions to challenges that museums have been grappling with for some considerable time. I think coronavirus has fortunately shone a spotlight on environmental challenges such as international travel and transport, showing us very clearly that we don't all need to be racing around the world for meetings with our peers, that Zoom, Teams, and all the rest of them can adequately provide for the vast majority of meetings. The viewing of spaces to present and stage our exhibitions, recce's, which we all did all the time, again, zooming around the world, can in many instances be done virtually. Even installations and de-installations of exhibitions can likewise, if handled and documented carefully, be done virtually. So these are all important steps, I would argue, in the right direction, which illustrate that there are alternative solutions, if the will is there. I think the challenges of international travel have seen an exponential rise in digital practice. And I don't think there's any real going back from this. I think all of us have, in so many ways, amplified aspects of our existing offer through digital. So, we've taken much more of our program onto digital platforms and online offers, virtual tours of exhibitions, conversations with curators. In Tate's case, we have these wonderful Tate Lates. So they're like late night in, they're sort of presenters discussing events, music, DJs, performances. They're a real party atmosphere, and it's all happening online. So we're now going into the homes of our audiences more than ever before. And that's really exciting. And obviously, that's a considerable responsibility. These enhanced initiatives have been tremendously successful. And in many ways, I think it's opened all of our eyes and allowed us to see the potential to reach our existing and indeed new audiences through this medium. Alongside and on top of enhancing the overall visitor experience. So we continue, I think, to learn lessons. We continue to evolve. Digital communications, especially disproportionately during lockdown. I think lockdown has reduced visitor capacity, has also allowed us an opportunity to reflect, and that's no bad thing. For a real creative reset, whether it be in areas such as digital advancement or the absence of international travel, forcing us to think about the ways that we can dispense with unnecessary travel, transportation in the future. And it has, I think, very importantly, enabled us to enact changes, which in Tate's case, Tate directors have been passionate about for years around sustainability. So, it really has amplified and enhanced this process and enabled us to do things that we've been thinking about for a long time. So, at Tate, we want global audiences to appreciate our collections, our exhibitions and events. We don't, however, want our collections to be crisscrossing the world, increasing our carbon footprint in the process. So we're attempting to be more targeted in our approaches, to keep our shows in particular regions of the world, and to offer local audiences the opportunity to see our exhibitions without necessarily traveling to London. Of course, we really want visitors to travel to London. We want audiences to come back to the museum as quickly as and as just as soon as they feel it's safe to do so. So I can't stress that enough. But we also want to be able to reach them locally, on their phone, their iPads, or directly in their living rooms or bedrooms. So I think despite all of the pain of the last months, I think it's vital that we seize the positives. The rate of digital enhancement, the greater awareness of the environment, and our role in genuinely addressing the problems of sustainability long term. For so long, we've been able to focus, we have been able to focus, I think, on our local audiences, involving them in the process and decision making, and seeking their advice as local residents, hopefully ensuring that they feel a greater sense of ownership and a greater inclusion in decision making. It is, after all, their museum. So all by way of saying that we're adapting all the time. We're remaining alert and hopefully sensitive to our environment and the natural world and our audiences and their evolving needs from a museum.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And it's all very interesting, this whole discussion. I'd like to open this question up to Laurelie of Musée d'Orsay. Can you share some examples of technology and programs and content and the ways it's provided a positive impact for your museum? And if you've had any feedback to date from those that have been implemented?
Well, it's in all fairness, I don't think that we are the most innovative museum in the digital area so far yet. Although I do echo totally Neil's words in a way that the lockdown has forced us or led us to be more digital, to go more digital than we used to, which is a great thing. That is the future. I totally agree that there's no going back, and why should it? I mean, it's a great thing. There's nothing wrong about going digital. The only thing is that we haven't found the ideal model yet, and I'm not sure anyone has. And that's our main concern, is that although we totally agree that digital program and initiatives, and honestly, I don't have any outstanding examples to share with you right now, because I think that we did the basics. We tried to bring the museums into people's homes, reusing every bit of footage that we had about, we have a large range of performing arts events. So of course they are always filmed. So we brought that footage and we tried to have a lot of conversations with curators and with staff museum explaining what they do in the museum. So everything was great. And a lot of those initiatives will be, I think, maintained in the long run because they're relevant, because they help us connect the museum, the artwork, people globally and with many generations that perhaps now only have this use, smartphones and tablets, and it's a great thing. We're thinking alpha generations, not even the Zoomers now, not even the Z generation, but the alpha ones. So that's a great thing. But in all fairness, we haven't found the model yet, because our main goal is to, again, I go back to what I was saying previously, is to provoke this encounter, the physical encounter, by a visitor contemplating an artwork. And that is the thought-provoking, emotion-provoking moment. And that cannot be matched by any sort of digital initiatives, no matter how advanced the technology, how creative the initiative is. It is a great way of occupying the space in between visits, or to as an incentive to come to the museum. But again, I insist, our goal is to have people coming into the museums, and it's not, well, it's a financial goal, let's face it, obviously we're not lying to each other, but it goes beyond that. The real thing is that we strongly believe that contemplating the artwork for real cannot be beaten. And it's something that we very much struggle for. And again, the other thing that we are thinking about is that there's a strong paradox here as opposed to 6 months before, is that now the digital has become sort of ordinary. It's something that everyone does. Well, not well, whatever, but it has become a little bit ordinary. And what is precious and valuable is the ability to go to places, because we were deprived of that for so many months. So it's an interesting shift. I don't know how long that will last, but I believe there is something there. I believe that the way we connect and engage with audiences will increasingly have a strong digital component. But now at this stage, we haven't found the great way yet. And again, the emotion that you feel is something that that is uncomparable and is unique. And the other thing is that we want to think digital as a global integration, not something as entertainment only or as one-shots in the museum. We really want it to be fully integrated with our projects, with our audience-driven approaches, with the way we envision this customer journey. And it's a journey for us. And I feel that we are less advanced than other museums are. And it's really inspiring to be sharing with you all today, because we have a lot to learn. And I think that, well, in my small experience and in the small benchmarks that we do, I don't see anyone that has the key yet, that really has found it. I don't know if I'm making myself very clear, but again, that said, when we are reimagining the visitor experience, it's obviously digital as well as physical. It's phygital. I don't know if that word makes sense anymore, but it includes new tools, new programs online as well as on site, because we know that the customer, I mean, the visitor journey starts way before it even approaches the museum. So there is something really interesting. And we know that the way people consume culture has shifted, is shifting, and will shift more and more. But I don't know if there is not going to be like a boomerang coming back into physical. This is something, again, I'm just giving your thoughts that are not very advanced, but we really are thinking about that right now. And I believe it's the future, but I don't know what future is it.
Thank you, Arlie. I mean, there's so many different thoughts there, and perhaps it's open for the museums to collaborate, to partner, to share resources, and based on some are a little bit further down the track than others. So I think this, obviously this is a really interesting conversation. But visitor experience and that interaction with the museum is important. Nothing can replace that beautiful physical moment where you can interact with the art. That can never be replaced. But I want to actually go into this next conversation, which is about visitors in the museums. Now that we can enjoy this being present, physically present in the spaces. The question for Andrew at the Whitney Museum of American Art, post-COVID, how has the approach of the interior and architecture and the layout of the museum adapted to accommodate new operations? And how do the patrons actually using this space differently to previously?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and thank you, Neil and Arlie, for the prior section. I think there's so much to go into in each of these topics. I think, and I should mention that our head of visitor experience, Adrian Hardwick, came to the Whitney 6 years ago from the Tate. So we borrow expertise internationally, another form of collaboration. But we started, I would say, from a relatively strong position in terms of spatial and architectural opportunities and challenges. Lauren certainly knows the whole process of the Renzo Piano designed building that opened in 2015. And, for those of you who don't know, the Whitney used to be in a 1960s Marcel Breuer designed building up on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which is both architecturally and contextually an entirely different equation. It's a very, I would say, affluent area, a more traditional side of New York, where many of the museums are, right on Museum Mile, and the Breuer building, which is a sort of very standard brutalist building, was a sort of fortress with a moat. The downtown location is very porous. We are in downtown Manhattan. We're next to the High Line, adjacent to Hudson River Park, and a great amount of activity that really has transformed that whole meatpacking Lower Chelsea West Village area. Now, there's complexity to that, of course, with the accompanying gentrification, and the team that was involved in the new building planning really tried to get out in front of that by thinking with community partners about how the Whitney could be a resource for them as well. But the building itself is quite spacious. We have the largest, our 5th floor is the largest column-free space in Lower Manhattan. The terraces are on almost every floor that allow for an indoor-outdoor experience. And we have an absolutely amazing on-site facilities team led by Peter Scott, who does an amazing job at sort of transforming the museum for COVID. We have over 150 on-site directional signs. We have one-way circulation routes that support social distancing. We have specific stairwells and elevators saved for different purposes. There are floor markings. We are not doing food and beverage program right now. So, there are a lot of tactical ways, in addition to, of course, the enhanced sanitizing and cleaning protocols and the capacity at 25% cap, the air filtration systems, automated temperature checks. I mean, it's a full run of the gamut. But I think to Arlie's point, I mean, I've been to the Whitney, I've been to other New York museums as well, and I'm just having the best visitor experiences I've had in a really long time. I mean, it's so spoiling to be in front of a masterwork and not have everyone with their iPhones all around you, and actually to have that immediacy of the experience. One other thing I'll quickly say is that, the Whitney is increasingly thinking about itself, not just, pulling people in, but also like, how do we bring ourselves out into the communities? And some of that is digital, but I should also mention that we, in terms of capital projects, are this year we'll open a large outdoor sculpture by David Hammond called Day's End, which is based on a Gordon Matta Clark artwork from the 70s, which embraces and complexifies ideas of land usage, of belonging, of emptiness, of spaciousness, sort of a ghost monument to a past New York. We have seen that many museums are finding opportunities to, it's great to talk about the building, but many museums are also trying to get outside their buildings and to make them more relevant to the people that they're trying to serve.
Thank you very much, Andrew. We're quickly running out of time today. There are so many fantastic topics that we can cover, and we can just probably keep on going for the next couple of hours. And I hope you all do after this conversation that we're having online. I want to close with a really very positive and optimistic subject. And what are you most excited about? And where do you see the biggest opportunities in adaptation and innovation for museums moving forwards? Now, I know, Sharon, we had you poised for the previous question, but I'd like to open up this question for you firstly.
Sure. I think the topic of this conversation of adaptation, I think and as we've been talking about, I think this opportunity to rethink the way that we work. And, some things will continue to be core to the work that we do, but, for me personally, overseeing our exhibition program and thinking about strategic initiatives, to rethink the way, a lot of what Neil was saying, to rethink those possibilities in terms of the exhibition programs, the partnership opportunities, and to think about those in different ways that still connect them in all the ways needed to our audiences, but think about how we're spending our resources, financial, staff time, and just really to begin to think about those things in a new way. That's what I'm excited about.
At the panel, do you guys have any other inputs you would like to add to that point?
If I may, I think that what is really exciting for us, again, but I think we're a bit peculiar in the landscape, is that we have an opportunity to rethink our model and to acquire tools that will help us face any type of crisis. Because let's face it, I don't think that will be the last one that we will have as long as our museums live. So I think that, yes, it's acquiring new tools to be relevant no matter what, and solid no matter what happens. And rethinking a model for us, French institutions, state-owned institutions, is finding a new balance between private and public funding. So for us, it's opening up to philanthropy, which is something that you guys in the US and the UK are very familiar with and very advanced as opposed to us. But for us, it's new. And I think that this is part of our future, is rethinking our model and being prepared to whatever happens.
I would just add, I think that this opportunity for some degree of self-reflection and a reset of sorts is really, truly exciting. Rethinking how we engage our audiences, rethinking ways of working, working more flexibly and sustainably, conceiving of the museum in reality as a space without walls, more pervious to public interaction, more democratic, and aware of the needs to change and better reflect its audiences globally. I think we all need to be much more positive, and we need to retain a sense of hope.
Andrew, a last comment from you from Whitney Museum.
Yeah, I will not echo every single thing that I said, but every single thing that was said, I agree with so much of it. I think necessity being the mother of invention is really, this is a case in point here. The accelerated change around so much of what we talked about around digital, around visitor experience, around collaboration, around diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are all things, as Aurélie said, that we were thinking about. As Sharon said, we have a strategic plan that we are implementing. A lot of these ideas were in that plan, and it took this occasion to really catalyze change. And to what Neil said, to maintaining hope and to trust the mission and the values of the organization while being self-critical about how to evolve. I mean, at the Whitney, we are the Whitney Museum of American Art. It is our remit to interpret, advocate for, and engage with American art in the broadest possible context. And I can't imagine much more destabilization or recontextualization of that charge in the past 12 months. So it's a huge opportunity.
Thank you, everyone, for your contribution. Over to you, Lauren.
Yes, so we'll just wrap up with the last couple of questions. If any attendees want to add some last-minute questions, I'll address them now. We'll start with the first one. It's not addressed to anyone in particular, so maybe Andrew, you want to answer this one. Did COVID make you rethink your digital strategy? Ways to connect with your audience online through videos, for instance?
Yeah, in short, absolutely it did. I mean, we have a terrific, lean but very effective digital in-house team that sits under a chief communications and content officer. And, both the volume output and the goals of that output, it was a massive step change, right? I mean, I think there's, we engaged artists who we've worked with, we've engaged artists in the collection, we engaged our staff, we pulled together public programming online in new and different ways than we ever have before. And not just replicating what we can be doing on site online, but trying to think more creatively about what it allows us to do. Our education team has been immensely successful with rolling out online education for New York public schools. So our art educators, I mean, the Whitney is organizing class art programs for school children. I mean, we could never have that many kids come in, and of course now they can't come in anyway. But the global reach of some of those programs is really staggering, and I think it begs the question of the complementary nature of on-site and online, and thinking of those audiences as overlapping, not distinct, but understanding that online audiences can be much broader geographically, can be much more diverse in terms of the access point, the entry point, and making sure that the topical nature of our programming is not prohibitively academic or really just for the insiders. I mean, we have terrific patron programming. That's a huge change for us as well. We have a lot of online patron programming now because we can't really have a big, lovely, fancy opening for an exhibition. But how do we make something accessible and interesting to someone who doesn't usually go to art museums? So I know that was a lot of sort of a laundry list of small things, but in short, yes, it has absolutely changed our digital strategy.
One other question. Love Andrew's point about outdoor space being used for public interactive art, etc. is that something the other speakers feel that the museums will now explore more? I mean, obviously, Sharon, you also mentioned that your outdoor space is very interactive and has been for a while. Neil, I'm not sure about yourself. How has the Tate embraced the? I mean, London's
The
not.
outdoor. I think we have some way to go, perhaps, with the outdoor. I would love our work and our content to spill out of the museum more, as you probably gathered from my earlier comments. So I think that there's more we can do to take work off the walls and to have it not only feature throughout the building, the architecture of the building and the interior, but the exterior too. So I would embrace that fully.
I'll ask a question that maybe even touched on what you mentioned earlier, Sharon, about what we spoke about, this non-event event. In terms of fundraising, there's obviously a big requirement for museums to have private funding. What do you think that the future is for fundraising without these events, if we can't really have these events because of the COVID requirements?
I mean, I think that, yes, there will continue to be challenges there, but I think there also are a lot of opportunities through, virtual gatherings, programming. We've been doing studio visits with artists, and in some ways, there do become opportunities to engage patrons in a way that you might not have been able to before, because someone had meetings going late into the evening and wouldn't be able to attend, or was traveling. And so there's a different kind of time commitment that comes through also from these virtual gatherings, right? You can do something right up to the moment that you log on and you connect with people. So I think there are opportunities there as well.
Sorry, and I know we're running a little late, so I'll end it with this question. In terms of public experience, we have known that there is no replacement for direct experience. Has any museum collaborated with technology companies or curating the experience for people who cannot make it to the museum? It's quite an interesting, we did talk about collaborations with other museums, but actually thinking outside our own museum network, has there been other collaborations with external companies? And maybe not.
It's a great idea, but sorry.
There had been some virtual visits that were made by Google Arts and Culture that were made a few years ago, but actually they're still relevant, even though we've changed the displays and built new galleries in between, but still. So that was sort of a partnership, even though I'm not sure that it was very, very presented as much as this one. But anyways, that helped us a lot throughout the lockdown, for example. And so that was a partnership that was made with a different company. We did have a few, we partnered with virtual reality, that hence my previous comment about we're still looking for the great models or the ideal one, because we tried different things, partnering with technology companies, for example, trying to bring the collections elsewhere in a digital way. And well, so far it has been interesting, but not ideal, if I might say.
I would say there are a couple examples that, I think there are a lot more hardware and software collaborations with museums who want to complement an on-site experience. The Cooper Hewitt pen comes to mind, where you can sort of log your journey and then look at it online after. The Rijksmuseum has a terrific Rijksstudio, which is a self-curated digital archive of their collection, which you can pull together your own show online. The Art Institute of Chicago has a program called Journey Maker, which has both on-site large tablets and then also online complementary learning programs. But those also are, you know, to Arlie's point, most institutions want people to come to the museum. And the only thing I can think of that's truly for those who are not at all considering coming, you know, actually was just earlier this year, the Virtual Online Museum of Art, VOMA, launched, which is the first, I mean, for PR Line, the first fully virtual museum, which pulls from public collections from Musée d'Orsay, from the Whitney, from MoMA, from others. So, you know, if you're interested, you might look up that example.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We will end it there. We did run over time, but I thank everyone for staying on and all our panelists for being so incredible today. Fantastic discussion points. I feel like we could talk for another hour. So if any of our attendees have any questions that they want answered or looking for more information, please contact myself, Lauren at pinovex.com, and we will be sending a replay of this to all our registered attendees. So thank you, everyone, and thanks so much for joining. So much to think about, exciting to think about getting back into the museums. I know I'm very excited and looking forward to seeing the next step in the museum world.